Good morning, everyone. My name is Leila Silva, and I'm a school psychologist for the San Mateo Foster City School District. I work at Abbott Middle School and Beresford Elementary School. I'm here to give some support and guidance on one of the questions we got about your kind of youngster, your elementary school kiddo kind of having some more meltdowns or emotionally escalated and really missing their friends. So a couple of things I want to go over is when your kid is really escalating emotionally, they're very irrational when they're that whole emotional part. So kind of one of the first steps you need to do is bridge the response of the brain, the emotional part with the rational part. And when they are kind of having a meltdown, only the emotional part of the brain is working. So the rational part is kind of out of the window. So what you first need to do is kind of validate those feelings when they are upset. Tell them, I understand that must be very hard. You don't have to see your friends. You don't get to see your friends. It's very frustrating, probably hard to understand. Maybe give them a response from you too as a parent. I miss my friends. I miss my coworkers. If they're really, really having a meltdown where they're kind of having a hard to breathe kind of thing, or just really profusely crying, maybe embrace them in a hug, have them have some deep breaths. Maybe sip on kind of one of their favorite drinks. So when they're really kind of having a hard time calming down, take a sip of a beverage and then take a breath. Have them maybe focus on something else in the room. We really just want them to get their attention away of what's going on emotionally to get them to kind of calm down. So you could count together, you could name colors, you could name animals, parts of the body. Tell me how many fingers you have, how many toes you have, things like that, because we just really need them to start regulate and calm down to a calmer state. And so once you've validated their feelings or once you've calmed them down emotionally, and that might take some time, you really want to then be able to try to gauge if they're at a little more of a sound mind to kind of rationally think about things. So again, that's where we need to bridge the emotional part with a kind of logical side of the brain. So once they're kind of in that state, then you kind of discuss kind of why they're not able to see their friends. I think sometimes we think, oh, they're escalating, or if we talk about kind of the difficulty things, will that make them more upset? But actually they're processing that information, and you're bridging the emotional part with the logical part together when they're in that calm state. And so you can kind of say, well, there is a reason why you can't see your friends, and let's kind of go over that, that's for safety. We're not able to kind of see our friends right now. You're helping people by staying at home. You are decreasing the amount of maybe people getting sick because we're at home. So you're really helping a lot of people by staying home, even though I know it's hard. And kind of going over that over and over again, why are we staying home? And that's okay to talk about, and that's okay to talk about any age, because they're not understanding kind of really what's going on. It can create anxiety, and they can't see their friends daily. So really talk about why we're staying home and the importance of staying home. And then what you can do is, in the question we got, you're doing a lot of great coping strategies, trying to FaceTime with friends, writing them letters, a little wave, drive by. Those are all really, really good things. And then when, they can't do that, kind of say, tell me about your friend or your friends, what were some of the favorite things you guys would do together in school or after school and things like that. Another thing is, if they wanting to FaceTime or make a phone call, maybe set it up as a routine. So, every Thursday at this time, this is when you get your FaceTime play date. So then it's kind of more expected every week that, oh, I'm getting upset, but then we're calming down, and I get to have my FaceTime with my friend on Thursday every week or something like that. So it's a little more, again, looking forward to kind of having that routine of with their friends. One thing, if you want to read a book, if you've heard about it, it's called The Whole Brain Child. It's very easy to read, user-friendly, really kind of helps you understand how your child's brain is developing, top down, bottom up, each side of the brain, kind of what's going on and why it's a lot difficult for them to regulate and kind of get to that logical side. So the more that you can talk about them in a calmer state with that logical, you're really going to hopefully see a decrease in those meltdowns. Talking about it, why they're staying home, all of that stuff. Really try to bridge that logical and that emotional together. It's a great book. I'm not all the way through it myself, but I'm really enjoying reading it. And again, really easy to read. So the whole brain child will kind of help you, and they give you scenarios as well, different scenarios of when your child's having difficulty. So that's it for now. I hope things get better and you've enjoyed these strategies. Have a good day.
Hi, my name is Deborah Wolk, and I'm a school psychologist. Today, I will be discussing the question regarding a child who is upset because they miss their friends, but they seem to have limited interest in teleconferencing with them. First, it is important to acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with missing your friends or being sad that you can't be with them. Make sure your child understands that their feelings are okay and guide them to more appropriate ways of expressing and managing those feelings, such as talking about how they feel or taking a break from a frustrating activity. We are all living in a time full of uncertainty and unfamiliarity, and this naturally increases stress levels in both children and adults. And children will often express this tantruming behavior as they are less experienced than adults at self-soothing. If a child is very upset, deep breathing techniques can be helpful just as with adults. However, young children often don't seem to understand what taking a deep breath means or why it's helpful. In such cases, it can be helpful to use certain tricks to encourage deep breathing. One of my favorite tricks is the flower and the candle. You take a flower and an unlit candle and encourage the child to smell the flower. Now blow out the candle. Observe. This is a way to get the child to breathe in slowly through their nose and out slowly through the mouth. And if they do blow out the candle a little too fast, you can encourage them to imagine a birthday cake full of candles and they have to blow them all out. Another technique for helping young children take slow, deep breaths is blowing bubbles. In order to successfully blow a bubble, a child must breathe slowly. If I blow too fast, no bubbles happen. But if I take a slow, deep breath, there are bubbles. It's both fun and distracting and encourages young children to take deep breaths. In this particular case, it sounded like the child was upset because they missed their friends and they weren't benefiting much from teleconferencing with them. One thing to keep in mind is that 7-year-olds are not quite at the age where they're likely to just want to sit and talk with their friends. This behavior is much more common for students who are getting closer to middle school aged. Most social interactions for younger elementary school students occur in the context of a shared activity. This can look like more cooperative play, such as organized sports, board games, or playing pretend, or it can also look like students just doing the same activity at the same time and occasionally commenting to each other about that activity. I would recommend some kind of pre-arranged activity for their teleconferenced playdate. These could be cooperative games, such as a scavenger hunt or playing pretend with dolls or action figures. Or if an adult is available to supervise, they could do some kind of cooking or crafting project. They could also do a side-by-side type activity, such as drawing pictures and showing each other what they've drawn, or even doing their homework, if it's not too distracting. If a child particularly misses giving their friends a hug, then they could bring stuffed animals to their teleconferenced play date and tell each other, now give Fluffy a hug from me. In summary, it's natural for students to miss their friends at a time like this, and also natural for them to have some difficulty self-soothing. Breathing exercises can help young children calm down when they're upset. And to help a young child benefit more from teleconference playdates, I would recommend having some kind of prearranged activity that they can engage in together, as this will create a social situation that will feel more natural for a child their age. Thank you so much, and stay safe.
Hi, my name is Lauren Marquez. I'm the school psychologist at Parkside Elementary, and I am a part of the educationally related mental health services team, which is another way of saying I provide individual and group counseling at different school sites within the district. So thank you so much for your question. I know this is very much something that is seen across many sites and something that many people, including myself, can relate to. And also just thank you for your partnership in this adventure. It has really been a toll on so many families, and it's really stretched sort of the expectations, really past kind of realistic expectations for our parents. I know right now you're juggling being a parent and a teacher and just, working from home, and just so many things have changed. And I would really like to applaud you in all of your efforts in that. And also just really highlighting that for our students, they only need one safe adult relationship to help mitigate the effects of trauma. And so while I'm sure you're thinking, I would love to have way more than that, my whole family is a great relationship for my child, I just wanted to kind of highlight that point again, that just in having you being there for your child, you are already doing wonders for them and setting them up for success to kind of get through this really difficult situation. And I would also like to underscore focusing on regulation over education, which it sounds like you are in this, in your response, because you're really highlighting that she's having some emotional meltdowns. But I think just, again, focusing on regulation over education and kind of helping them cope through those feelings that might feel huge and that they're going to last forever, because, this is what everyone likes to say, it's unprecedented. We haven't seen this happen before. So especially for our younger students, they might feel like this is just going to be how it is forever. So I think focusing on just kind of handling how to de-escalate and kind of being present in the moment is really very crucial. And so I am very grateful that you brought this up for us to discuss. And so the other part of that is resilience. So while there's a lot of pressure for you, if I'm now saying that it just takes one trusted adult to kind of help with that trauma, you might be feeling like, oh, I have to be perfect in every way in modeling that resiliency or those coping skills. And we are going to make mistakes. That is just a very human thing for us to do, is making mistakes. And that's okay, as long as we are open to learning from them and growing from them. But with resilience, it's really important to kind of know how it's very much a rubber band. So if we stretch it too fast, it might break and snap, but kind of just being calm with ourselves and knowing that we are going to go through some change, we're going to be stretched, but if we kind of take it one day at a time and we're kind to ourselves, we're going to bounce back and we're going to be okay. So I think that is, again, really a crucial point that we want to model for our kids, is just things will go back, we will maintain our shape, but if we try to push ourselves too fast, things might kind of snap and we'll lose it. But with that, kind of knowing that we're going to make mistakes, kind of just acknowledging that right in the beginning, this is going to happen. It's also incredibly important that we practice self-kindness. I know very often we are telling our students, our children, that you need to be kind to others, but I think a huge part that we sometimes neglect or we just forget to mention is that practicing kindness to ourselves is hugely important. We talk to ourselves more often than we talk to anybody else. We're kind of stuck with our own voice. This is what we hear most often. And it's important that that voice we're listening to is kind. That voice that you use to speak to yourself is the same voice that you would use to speak to a friend. And oftentimes in my counseling sessions, I'll talk about the inner coach and the inner critic, sort of these two voices that go in our head and they're trying to fight for our attention. The inner critic being sort of, you'll never figure this out, COVID's going to go on forever, things are just going to be crazy, just kind of really spiraling on all that negative stuff that is just honestly very easy for us to kind of delve into. Whereas with the inner coach, it's not about pretending everything is fine and everything is going to be great, because that is not something that prepares us for life either. But it kind of acknowledges that difficulty, saying, yeah, this is going to be hard, but, and then using that growth mindset of, the word yet, we haven't figured this out yet, but I know a few people that I can ask or a few strategies that I can try. It's just kind of giving us that sense of hope with still being, connected to reality, but just knowing that there are other options for us. And so kind of using that positive voice can really help us in that self-compassion or self-kindness. And it makes things feel a little bit easier to get through. Whereas if we were just only focusing on our inner critic, things would just be so difficult and tough that we might start feeling, really frustrated or sad, and then just kind of give up and not try. And then we would continue that process and thinking, well, then this is how it's going to be forever. All that to say is that it's so incredibly important to practice self-compassion. And so I just want to acknowledge all of those things that you mentioned in your response in terms of writing letters, dropping them off at the friends' houses, writing by the houses to say hi, trying to FaceTime. Those are all really amazing strategies that you're already doing. So again, I'd like to applaud you for that, because I think we need to kind of have that validation and that we are doing a lot, and oftentimes it's enough. I think that that's really important to note. And then, sorry, I wrote a couple of notes here so that I wouldn't forget. That part where you're having her write letters, I think is important for two reasons, if not more. Not only does it help that connection with the friend and that you're dropping it off and maybe they're having some sort of pen pal situation in the correspondence, but also writing these letters, or maybe even just journaling, it really presents as an opportunity for her to process her feelings or the events that are kind of going on throughout her day that otherwise she might not feel that she always wants to share with her family, because maybe you're kind of all experiencing that same thing. But part of journaling, and not just processing your feelings in those events to kind of figure out how you feel about it, as the student, how they feel about it, part of that desire for connection is validating your story. So if you were to go through life and not talk to anybody, who else would really know what you went through? And so in journaling and writing those letters, that's such a great strategy that you're already doing that is going to help her kind of make that connection, help her process those feelings, and also feel validated that her story is being heard. In terms of hugs, that's a tough one, honestly. That's something that I think we're all really suffering from right now, especially for loved ones that are outside of our household. And this is something that they're coining as the term touch starvation, and it's tough. I guess I'm being a little bit redundant, but when we give hugs, that hormone oxytocin is released, and this not only boosts our immune system and lowers our heart rate, it's considered the bonding hormone. So that really helps us kind of making those attachments and kind of, furthering those relationships with our friends. Honestly, it can't be genuinely replaced. I can come up with some other strategies, but there isn't going to be a solution, if you will, for replacing hugs. And honestly, touch is the first emotionally meaningful sense that we have when we're born, and it's also the last one to go. So this is a pretty big part that we're kind of missing right now. And so I did get to check in with my occupational therapist, Danielle Boris, and she is great. She brought up the idea of kind of doing like a self-hug, and some research does show that this also kind of releases some level of oxytocin, which is, again, what we get from hugs. And so kind of giving ourselves a really big squeeze, again, I know it's not the same, or hugging a body pillow, anything that's kind of related to that touch or kind of bringing us into the present moment is also very helpful for getting us through symptoms of anxiety or panic attacks, because sometimes if we kind of let that inner critic go and we start spiraling with all of those negative thoughts that are sometimes kind of easy to just fall into, if they just come on really suddenly and they keep going, we can really kind of lose track of the reality that's in front of us, and it can become sort of a dangerous spot to be in. So panic attacks, though temporary, are very intense and emotionally overwhelming. So to help you get through them, we use a grounding technique. And this could be looking for a few different things in our reality right next to us. So maybe look for 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So that is something that kind of pulls us out from that negative spiral and brings us again to that present moment. And so that kind of like hugging, it kind of brings us to that moment. So if we're hugging a pillow, we're using that technique where we're looking for all the different things in our environment. Those are considered grounding techniques. Other coping skills that help reduce and stress are exercise. I know that's kind of a tough one for me personally to find time to exercise. Talking to a trusted adult, naming those difficult or hard to have feelings such as sad or lonely. If your kid is having a hard time naming these, maybe pose it as like a non-judgmental question using body clues. Like, I noticed that you aren't talking very often, or maybe it seems like you're kind of quick to become frustrated. Are you feeling maybe a little lonely or irritated? Really trying to focus on what it is that you see in front of you, like maybe their facial expressions or their behavior, and kind of naming it for them, but just kind of asking if that's what that is, so that they can say, oh, actually, you know what, no, I'm feeling more this. But then they know that this is how they're presenting to the world. And then after they kind of name that feeling, you can ask, like, how big do you think that feeling is? Do you think it's like a little feeling? Is it a pretty big size? Is it so huge that it's taking over our body? And that can be really helpful for a student or a child to know that, you know, feelings come in all shapes and sizes, because we can be like a little annoyed, or we can be hugely annoyed and now I need to take a break. And that's okay. All of those feelings are okay. They're not good or bad. They just have different kind of effects on our body. And I can also provide a visual poster that kind of has all these different items, strategies that you can use, and maybe place this in maybe a calm down corner. This is not to be confused with a timeout space. This is something that you could have just in the corner of your room. Maybe it's like a couple of really nice soft pillows, or like a candle that smells really good. And you don't even have to light it, just kind of like you can smell the candle. Something kind of squishy. Something that they can kind of stare at, maybe like some cotton balls, or just like a little visual, I forget what those are called, but you can like spin them upside down and you can kind of see like the oil fall down. Just, it kind of depends on what your child finds interest in, and I would very much encourage you to kind of work on that with them, and say, what is something that you would help you calm down, and let's put this in this corner. And we can come to it when we're frustrated. And, you know, here, let's practice it now while we're calm, because honestly, that is the best state to be in when you're trying to learn something new. And also as the adult, it would be really great to practice using this. So maybe if you're frustrated and it's small enough where you can kind of be mindful and practice some great coping strategies in front of them, you can say, I'm really frustrated, or I feel really frustrated when you throw your school materials, or I feel really sad when you don't want to share your day with me. I'm going to take a few deep breaths, or I'm going to excuse myself so I can kind of think clearly and come back. I think really explicitly stating how you're feeling, why it is that you're feeling this way, kind of how their behavior affected you, and then what your next step is, instead of just kind of going, I'm going to use the restroom, and then just kind of disappear for an extended period of time. Tell them this is how you are kind of needing that time to decompress, and so that you come back to the situation with a clear mind, so that, you know, as the adult, we are held to a higher standard, but it's important for the students to know that this was part of your process in helping you kind of come back with a clear mind. So then that way they realize, oh, when I'm frustrated, this is what I need to do. And in terms of deep breathing, this is also really helpful. So if oxytocin lowers our heart rate, and that's what we get from hugs, another way of helping our heart rate lower is deep breathing. And so I know a lot of people just say, just take a deep breath. But there are very sincere ways of practicing this. The easiest one that I found for our younger students is 4-4-4 breathing. So that's where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and breathe out for 4 seconds. The more complicated it becomes in terms of how long you hold it or how long you breathe in, it can seem a little frustrating for students, and it doesn't take as easily. So 4-4-4 has been my most successful one in practicing. And I also have a few visuals that I can make a PDF copy of in English and in Spanish, that this would also kind of help bring a little bit more balance, kind of release some more serotonin, and just kind of help us kind of decompress and become reconnected with our body in a more regulated and calm way. So one of these would be elephant breathing. And on the back of this, it kind of explains how we can practice that, and maybe some mindful kind of questions to become connected. There's also one about like a special place. being a rainbow, and sort of each color represents something different. All is well, dancer, and tree. So again, all of these are really great visuals, and they have step-by-step directions. So I will upload these, but I think there are a lot of different ways that we can still kind of get that same, not the same chemical release, but we can still find ways to become regulated even when we can't get those hugs that we want. And we can just kind of remind ourselves that we haven't been able to get the hugs we want yet, but we know that we're keeping our friends and family safe. And for right now, that might just be enough. Thank you again so much for reaching out to us. Please know that you can always send an email or check in with your school psychologist. We are here for you. And again, thank you so much for your partnership and collaboration throughout this adventure that we are going through.